Thank you, Barbara. On behalf of Unity of Santa Maria, I would like to welcome everyone here to our Indigenous Peoples Day Zoom. It is our intention to bring forth spiritual music and prayers and our thoughts to honor the culture and traditions of our Native American and First Peoples everywhere, and to always hold in our hearts one people, one planet, one love. This morning, we had the great good fortune of listening to the wisdom of 88-year-old Lakota elder Basil Braveheart, Korean combat war veteran and survivor of boarding schools, and embodiment of forgiveness. This amazing man who has been a leader, he tells us, because of what his grandma Lucy taught him in 1938 about forgiveness and not blaming or shaming people. Basil told us that sound and vibration have the power to heal us. And so we are ecstatic to be together today, in Basil's words, in a holistic, rhythmic, divine resonance of sound that heals us. And so I begin with this thought, that there has been so much that's gone before us that has hurt and diminished and discounted Indigenous wisdom. And so our intention today is to uplift and to inspire and to intone together this blessing upon all people of Earth in all our languages and cultures and traditions. So it is in this spirit of great respect and great love for Indigenous wisdom, for cultures and traditions around this world that are original, native, that we offer this today. And we begin with my brother from India, who has his way of living on his shirt, love all. So please join me in welcoming for our opening, Nimesh Patel, Nimo.
Thank you, Judy, for that warm-hearted opening of this special day. When I think of this day now that we have the blessing to celebrate collectively every year and every day, two words that come up for me are what you shared upon, reverence, deep reverence, and prayer. Reverence gives us, I think, the capacity to just recognize the depth of history before us. And like you said, for any culture, 1 week ago was Mahatma Gandhiji's birthday. And as we celebrate every year on October 2nd, the journey that he led upon, the land of India, and what he was able to achieve through his love, through his prayer, through his sadhana and devotion, is, I think, the same thing we're recognizing little by little, gradually everywhere, right? Through this day, for example, the seeds that have been planted for generations to recognize and respect and send reverence to our Indigenous brothers and sisters' journeys. And so a deep sense of reverence is what this day will stand for in my heart and hopefully reflect in my actions. And prayer, I always think of, we have two ways to make change. One is through our actions, and one is through our heart. and the capacity to pray and send these intentions of love, reverence, and support alongside our actions are, the ways that we can help support our Indigenous brothers and sisters, families, cultures, traditions, all across the planet. So thank you all for being here today in this spirit. And just want to share a small poem called Prayer in that spirit. Well, I'm sitting here in silence, sending people smiles and realizing when we send out love, it keeps on rising. So I choose to close my eyes to send positive vibes into every living being from the ocean to the skies. As I look at all the crisis, I realize that I just can send my love and prayers and forgive all of my rivals. To me, this is all priceless. To transform all the violence through sacrifice and trying, sitting on this cushion silent. May all beings be happy, peaceful and nonviolent. May not one being suffer in their minds, even the tyrants. May all souls find alignment with their hands, their hearts and minds. And may all of us keep walking from ignorance to be wiser. Thank you.
Thank you, Nimo. And thank you and your parents for taking the time out to be with us on your journey today. We love you. Now we go to Russia to be with Aliela Gorzaltchik, an amazing musician and spiritual wisdom teacher. Thank you again, Aliela, for being with us today.
Thank you very much. Blessings of peace and light, greetings of love to all of you. So today we're honoring our ancestors, and my roots and my ancestors, in spite of I'm living in Russia, they are from people of Israel. And I wanted to share with you beautiful prayer from Jewish spiritual tradition, which is related to Jewish tradition, but I think it's very universal and can be useful for everyone, maybe. So it reminds us about purity of our soul. And according to the Jewish tradition, all people all came from the one source of life, from one big soul. And we're all brothers and sisters because we were born from one archetype of human, the first man, Adam. So first I will read these words in English, the translation, and then I will say in Hebrew. Lord, the soul that you have given me is pure. You created it and breathed it into me, and you keep it in me, and in the future you will take it from me and return it to me again in the world to come. All the time that the soul is in me, I thank you, my God, and the God of my ancestors, the Lord of all creatures, the Lord of all souls. Blessed are you who returns souls to bodies. Eloah, neshama shenatata bi teorai, ata barata, ata yatzarta, ata nefachta bi, ואתה משמרה בקרבי, ואתה תתלית לה ממני, ולהחזרה בי לעתיד לבוא. כל הזמן שנשמה בקרבי, מודה אני לפניך. אדוני אלוהי ואלוהי אבותיי, ריבון כל המעשים, אדון כל הנשמות. ברוך אתה אדוני, המחזיר נשמות לגרים מתים. Amen. And let's remember the first chapter of Torah, the Genesis, the creation of the world. And it says, like God said, let us make a human in our image and likeness. So it reminds us that we all have this God's image in us. And actually, all of us, we are descendants of the first human, and we can sing together the line describes this process of creation of humanity, of mankind. Nase Adam Betzalmeinu, Nase Adam Kedmuteinu. The music written by Sufi master of our days, Saadi. Nase Adam Betzalmeinu, Nase Adam Kedmuteinu, Nase Adam Betzalmeinu, Nase Adam, Nase Adam, Nase Adam Betzalmeinu, Nase Adam Kedmuteinu, Nase Adam Betzalmeinu, Nase Adam, Nase Adam, Nase Adam Betzalmeinu, Nase Adam Kedmuteinu, Nase Adam Betzalmeinu, Nase Adam, Nase Adam, Nase Adam Betzalmeinu, Nase Adam Kedmuteinu, Nase Adam Betzalmeinu, Nase Adam, Nase Adam. Let us remember that we are all one people, one soul, one world, one love.
Thank you, Aliela. Give everyone a blessing. And to all of our ancestors, we send this blessing out. It's with great respect and love that I introduce Deng Ming Dao, my Taoist teacher, and such a great disseminator of the Tao through the person that he is and the way that he walks in this world. And
it's my honor to be here, and I'm very happy to support Reverend Judy in everything that she's doing. And it's especially important that we gather today to think about our past, but also to think about our future. And no matter what, our future has to be joining together with each other. and to put aside all the enmity that has gone before, and to try to reach out to every person on this planet so that we can move forward into a better world. And with that in mind, I would like to offer this prayer today. We are the children of the sky and land. We want to live in peace and harmony. We want our children to thrive. We struggle to return to the earth and all peoples to that balance. Our prayer not only goes to the sky and land, but to every person on this planet. We speak to their hearts. Prayer links our hearts together, and that circle joins with the circle of the sky and land. We ask everyone to join us in this prayer, to return us all to our balance with nature. The rivers flow forever. The mountains are still forever. Rain knows the seasons, and each sunrise brings birdsong. Hope is always with us, and forgiveness opens the way to new endeavors. The only way of life we need was left to us by our ancestors. The only place we can live is here on the earth and under the sky. The only way to live with others is to live as friends. The only way to live is to reject hatred. The only way we need to follow is the way of sky, earth, and love. May we each work to make this a better world and encourage everyone to join in one path, one world, one peace, one love. Amen.
Thank you, Ming Dao. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us?
I'm just so grateful to see all of you joining together, and even to think about these issues is important. Nowadays, people are so eager to move on. Can't we just get past this? Can't we get over it? But whatever brought us here helped to make us who we are today. But who we're going to be tomorrow is up to us. Sometimes one person can't think of everything themselves. Only by joining together in a unity such as we're doing today can we truly find a way forward. And that way forward cannot be to exclude anyone, cannot be to exploit anyone, cannot be to leave anyone behind. Let's not leave anyone behind. People don't talk very much about spirituality today. Religion is supposedly declining. But I would suggest to you that spirituality and religion are more important than ever. Perhaps because they're supposedly declining, we have some of the problems that we face today. So, it may seem simplistic, but we can do the opposite. We can advocate love over hatred. We can advocate unity over divisiveness. And we can advocate our commonality over everyone being celebrated as being singular and important. It's not that the individual isn't important. It's just that every individual is more powerful when they join together in love. And so I want to express my gratitude to Reverend Judy for inviting me here today. And I want to bless all of you for joining in today and thinking about these issues and encouraging others to follow a meaningful path.
Thank you, Ming Dao. You know, before coming to California, I never really understood the history of oppression and the history of marginalization of the Chinese people. And, when we were in Oroville, and I started to understand some of the history that was never taught to me in school, my heart just broke, for the way that people were treated. And you have always been such a bridge. Our teacher, Basil Braveheart, this morning told us that his grandmother taught him no shaming, no blaming. In fact, he told us that she called the people that killed the Lakota the Long Knives. And she told Basil, forgive the Long Knives, forgive them and their children. And in doing that, you give your life to the divine. And I just thought that was so beautiful, and also reminds me of you and the way that you walk your path and the way that you choose your words and are always a way for people to come together in harmony.
Well, I think that it's inevitable to regard myself as a hybrid person. And I wouldn't say I'm not Chinese and I'm not American, I'm both.
Mhm.
And so there are times when I might think of something from my American side and some things that I might think of as my Chinese side. But what I like to think is that it doubles my possibilities. And people like me who are hybrid people set an example for what the future is going to be. I don't think we're going to have any sort of monocultural world anymore. Even if you go to China, they have cell phones, they speak English, they're watching TV, and so on. It's one globe now. And the sooner we recognize that, the better. If you look at world history, hasn't there always been migration? And if there wasn't migration from Europe, the United States wouldn't have been established. People have always moved, but they move over this earth, and this earth becomes our whole world. Shouldn't we welcome the stranger? When I was growing up, my grandmother had an apartment in Chinatown, and the door was always open and food was always on the stove, and anybody could come in and have a meal. And that's not just about sharing with other people. It's about remembering that we really are all kin with each other. And for those who are unfortunate, shouldn't we feed them? And for those who are cold, shouldn't we clothe them? And for those who are homeless, shouldn't we shelter them? This is actually the lesson of being Chinese American. Not the menu in a Chinese restaurant and not the quaint signs in Chinatown. That memory, not just of being part of a previous homeland, but of being poor and of being strangers in a different land, that reminds us of something fundamental, which is that we are all related to each other and we all have to take care of each other. Now, there are differences, of course, between Chinese and American culture, but I don't spend my time trying to sort out those differences or trying to emphasize those differences. I try to find what each one has to help me understand this world. So to be bicultural as I am, or to be multicultural as all of us will inevitably become, can be an asset. It's not a source of confusion, it's a source of richness. And no matter what, in the end, it's about honoring the great wisdom that we have from all the peoples in the world and finding the peace that every society, every culture has sought throughout history. We can do that. And we can do that if we honor the differences in ourselves and the differences among other people, and find not just conflict, but find unity in that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ming Dao, for your wisdom sharing and for your presence in our lives. And another gem from this morning is that we heal from vibration. You know, just healing happens just hearing each other's voice vibration. And we also heal from song. And so I'm going to welcome Daniel Nahmod now. And this morning, Basil said, the song sings the singer, and we heal from the vibration. And Daniel's music is some of the most healing vibrations of our time. And I'm so grateful for you, Daniel. And thank you again, Ming Dao, for taking your time to be with us out of your work day. And thank you, Daniel, also for squeezing us in.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, I'm not going to sound nearly as wise as that gentleman Ming Dao sounded. That was beautiful, beautifully said. Anyway, hello everybody. Thanks for having me, Judy. I have to say, you know, I am I'm here in Orange County, by the way, and nice to be with you. I have an addiction to choosing songs that are appropriate, choosing songs on the fly. Anybody who's ever had me at any kind of event, any kind of speaker, any kind of house of worship, they try to pin me down and figure out what it is I'm going to sing so that I can somehow commit to it, so they can put a title in a program or prepare a band, and I almost always get away with not committing at all because I feel my way and scan. I kind of listen and feel what's happening and scan my entire song catalog. And I've written a lot of bad songs and a handful of pretty good ones, and I kind of think about all of them. And so, Judy, I have to say, this invitation stumped the band for a while. Not today, but leading up to it, I'm already thinking, what is it I would say and what is it I would sing for an event honoring Native and Indigenous people? And you know what, Judy? I'm going to go ahead and say that I am one of your first beneficiaries of this program. I'm not going to presume I'm the only one, but I have already benefited from the invitation, because I did something I have never done, which is I looked up the origin of the town I grew up in. Okay, so first I feel like listing this. It's an easy thing to find, but it's worth sharing this list very quickly. Are you ready? These are American states that are named for native, indigenous tribe words or tribes themselves. In America, of our 50 states, Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Connecticut, Idaho, Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, Nebraska, New Mexico, the Dakotas, Ohio, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Wisconsin, and Wyoming, all deriving their names from native people who lived here before European colonists and settlers arrived to, whatever you'd call it, take the land, essentially. But I had never, I grew up in Illinois, I grew up in a suburb of Chicago, and I still remember as a 7-year-old, and by the way, I did promise you I wasn't going to sound nearly as wise as Ming Dao, but I remember I lived in Pittsburgh, and I was 7 years old, and my parents told me that told us, the three Nahmod boys, that we were moving to Illinois, to the Chicago area. We were moving to a town called Skokie. And your invitation, Judy, triggered the memory that when my parents told me we were moving to a town called Skokie, I assumed we were moving to an Indian reservation of some kind. because the name sounded like an Indian tribe. And in fact, today at 51 years old, I discover that it's not a tribe, but it is a Potawatomi word for giant swamp, which is what Skokie was before white settlers arrived there in the early 1800s. Chicago was beginning, Chicago itself being a derivation of a Native American word. So Skokie and several current suburbs of Chicago, north suburbs of Chicago. If Chicago is on Lake Michigan, if you travel north of Lake Michigan about 10 miles, you arrive at Evanston, Illinois, which is where Northwestern University currently is. And if you go inland from Northwestern, or inland from Evanston, just a few miles, you arrive at Skokie, Illinois, where I grew up. Well, it was the domain, may not be the right word, but it was the place where several tribes lived around Illinois, Wisconsin. The entire Great Lakes region was well settled and occupied by Native Americans. Many tribes represented. In Chicago, there's a Caldwell Bank. Caldwell was an American Indian, Native American chief, a tribal chief. I did not know this until today. And there were treaties, there were wars, of course. There were wars between the tribes, but there were also wars between Andrew Jackson, between the relatively new American government, federal government, and Native people who were standing in the way of, a land grab, essentially, of, call it settlement, whatever you want to call it. And the wars were, over time, won by the white settlers. They were won by the federal, you all know this, right? And the tribes in Illinois in the early 1800s, as a part of their treaty to end one of many wars, I think it was the Black Hawk War at the time, which, by the way, I never connected that the Chicago Blackhawks are the hockey team. But the Black Hawk War ended with a treaty that resulted in the native tribes in northern Illinois agreeing to leave. And so 145 years later, the Nahmod family moves into a little apartment in Skokie, Illinois. Both names derived from native tribes on land that was never the federal government's until it was taken by force. Now, that was my first important lesson, Judy. So I want to thank you for that. The second point of connection leads me to a song, and this one is also really quite significant for me. So again, I thank you for the invitation, because I didn't know what was coming. You see, you know, those of you, you've seen me. Many of you have seen me sing before. I mean it when I say it. I mean it when I sing it. So I'm really thinking about what an Indigenous people event means to me, because I don't actually know if there's any definition of Indigenous that would apply to me or my immediate family. We're not Indigenous to the United States. My grandparents on my mother's side survived the Holocaust, barely, spent the World War II in a labor camp in Siberia. My mother was born in a little rickety clinic in Uzbekistan as her parents were leaving Siberia and attempting to return to Poland, learning that they couldn't return to Poland, decided that they were going to go to West Berlin, where American-occupied West Berlin, where they were then sponsored to come to the United States by a distant relative, and sponsored to come to Chicago, which is why I grew up in Chicago. That being said, I used to celebrate Thanksgiving and Pesach with my Bubby and Zadie and their spouses, the four of them, and a handful of old Jews who had survived the Holocaust together, who weren't related except by their uh, by their trauma and tragedy and survival. They arrived in Chicago together, or they met each other in Chicago and discovered this commonality and became the closest thing to family that they had, because they had all, every one of them, lost everyone in their entire family to the concentration camps. So they had no ancestors anymore. They had no cousins. They had no parents or grandparents. They had no uncles and aunts. They were it. And they felt like family. As a boy growing up, we would go, like I said, Passover and Thanksgiving were the two holidays where there were two tables in my Bubby and Zadie's house. A big table for the grown-ups, where they ate insanely delicious European food that is probably lost to history, the recipes of those things. Incredibly delicious food. And then there was a kids' table where gradually this generation that had survived barely gave birth to their kids, who gave birth to their kids, and gradually the kids' table filled up over time. And of course, generations go on, and now we're essentially a generation removed. Jude is now our boy is now 9, and my parents now have Sonia, who born in that clinic in Uzbekistan under the most challenging of circumstances, right? Absolute destitution and hardship, absolute terror, and absolute grief. They already knew that they had lost everybody when my mom was born in that little clinic. The only reason they were allowed to stay in the clinic overnight is because my Bubby was a skilled seamstress and offered to sew uniforms for the nurses if they could stay a couple of days so she could recuperate. Otherwise, they were going to be shoved out, she with her brand new baby. My uncle, or my mom's brother, was born in a DP camp outside Berlin. So here is my point of connection. Here is where I find, for me, one of the secrets to a peaceful world is empathy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always easy to summon. On the surface, at first glance, other people can look like they're having very other experiences that we can't relate to. But I wrote this song I'm about to sing for you as I contemplated the question of how I came to be who I am, a question that can never be answered because of how much was erased from history. No photos, no names, they certainly never talked about the people they lost. They were too heartbroken about it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about African people put into ships,
Mm-hmm.
which were, I try not to think about it, and there are paragraphs I've read about the conditions just on the ships that I wish I had never read. They were taken to a place they'd never been, to be treated worse than animals for the rest of their lives, to watch their own children be treated that way, to be separated from their spouses, their children. And my connection here is to lose all relationship to the country that they were from. The language they grew up speaking, I'm sure, was not allowed. Whatever religious traditions were, I'm sure, obliterated. Their names were lost. And I think of the Luden family arriving in the United States and having lost all connection to its past. My point of empathy, and I have not suffered in this way, but my point of empathy when I think of Black Americans who don't know in a literal way where they're from. And then I think about Native Americans for whom their language, their art, their spiritual traditions were obliterated systematically. And it is not hard. If you look at the, and I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but if you look at the social ills, the challenges that a Holocaust surviving community faces, that a Black American community faces, that a Native American community faces, all I have to do is ask myself, how would I feel if I didn't know my name, or my country, or my language, or my religion? How groundless and foundationless would I feel? And it is a long-term tragedy. It's hard to feel good about. It's hard to feel the same about Skokie, Illinois, which I loved growing up in. It's hard to feel quite the same, having read what I needed to read today about it. So here is a song that I wrote about my own story, but comes to mind today when I think about the story of Indigenous people in America and in Africa and in Australia and in so many other places, for whom their past was rendered unmentionable or forgotten, erased. So here we go. There are secrets at the center of my story, priceless pages torn out by unseen hands. There are questions that I've always wanted answered, and I know that I will never have the chance. There's a reason why I ended up a singer. There's a reason why I never like to drink. There's a reason I prefer winter to summer. There's a reason why I tend to overthink. But history is stolen, connections are broken, and I'm on an island to myself. And I can't help but wonder whose name was I under as I feel my way in the dark. Just me and my anonymous heart. All the faces washed away without inscription. All the lovers come to unacknowledged end. All the poetry and melody forgotten. All the languages that won't be heard again. When history is stolen, connections are broken, and I'm on an island to myself. And often I wonder whose name was I under as I feel my way in the dark. Just me and my anonymous heart. More than one heart beats in my chest, so tired I can hear them sigh when I rest. They're begging to be unerased, but then mine is the only face I see, looking back at me. Then a child is born and history starts over. We're determined that no mystery remain. 'Cause even more than teaching right and wrong and reading, we're making sure he knows the meaning of his name. Your perfectionist tendencies come from your mommy. Your messiness, well, that's all me. And when you sing along with a romantic song, that's a habit all three of us have. And I hope you'll remember your stories you'll treasure when you become a dad. Thanks for having me, Judy.
Thank you for that beautiful teaching and for your amazing empathy and connection between the Holocaust of your heritage and the Holocaust of Native and African people. One of the first things I remember Basil telling me about boarding school was that they made him kneel at a cross of Jesus, and they cut his hair, and they wouldn't allow him to speak his native language. And he said that he looked up at the cross of Jesus with his long hair, and he was so sad because in his culture, you know, your hair is your power, and you know, and his language, he was telling us they have 140 sounds in Lakota, and we only have 30 in English. And it was almost impossible to learn English and to understand what people were trying to say. And he looked up at that cross and he said, God, man, how come you get to have long hair? Always with a sense of humor, that man. Always. And I am so grateful to know that at 88 years of age, that we still have him here, and your mother and your father, and these amazing, resilient, strong souls of love and justice in our midst. Ayolane Haluskey has been a student of the Native traditions and an esteemed member of the Taoist, the community of Basil Braveheart and many other Native peoples. So it is my great blessing, Ayolane, to welcome you here to Zoom and to ask you to share your wisdom with us.
Well, thank you. Not sure I'll be able to sum it up wisdom, but we'll find out. All right. Yeah, thank you all for coming today. I guess mainly that I can speak from my own personal experiences. I should not be speaking for another tradition or native group. But often I do give talks for Basil. When Basil can't attend here in Florida, I'll call him and ask him, and he'll ask me to speak on certain subjects. So I have been honored in that way, and I'm very humble when I do that. It's something that's very tender to my heart. I come from immigration as well to this side of the world, United States, and from a Polish background, German, Irish, Scottish, English. I have a lot of mixed Europeans blood in me. But I was born and raised in Florida, so I guess I consider myself a native earthling, and always interested in nature. I've been pulled into the natural world since a young age. I think I actually spoke the language of nature before I spoke any other languages, and was very attracted to the native teachings at an early age. There was a time in my life where I guess I can say I felt like I was crazy because I didn't speak what the churches were speaking and how the people were acting and the way that it was conducted to be normal in society, should I say, until I met a native elder speaking. And I actually felt sane for the first time in my life. I was about 15 years old. And it saved my life, quite literally. I started attending ceremonies, and if it wasn't for those times, I probably wouldn't be sitting here, because I was an island within myself as well. It felt very black sheep compared to the people that I was around. I remember sitting with an elder with the Muskogee Creek Nation one time, and I was really concerned about seeing how things were going from my point of view at the age of 15, the disappearance of a lot of teachings and stories and songs and ceremonies were being pretty suppressed, even still. Even after natives were legally allowed to practice their tradition at, what was it, 1979 or something like that was when it was actually legal for them to practice some of their traditions, which I found very fascinating as well. But I asked that Muskogee elder, I said, what happens when those stories and those traditions disappear? And I was really concerned. And he kind of leaned back against this pine tree and, wiped the sweat off his brow and just looked off into the woods. And there's a river going by. And he says, just go out and listen. That's what we did. Just take the time to go sit by that creek or sit by that tree and listen, because they're speaking to you all the time. And even Basil today said, the vibration of the divine is within all of us and is within all plants and all trees. And it's the support of what you can't see, like our history, the part that you cannot see by looking at my face. You don't know my history, but it's the support of all of that stuff that brings us up to the divine that we can be now, and the futures that we can continue with. I find it interesting because I'm a naturalist now. I'm a naturalist for the county. I work for the government, and I teach people about connecting with the natural world. So I take people into the wilderness on little quick hikes or kayak trips. And I find that people normally come with fear. They take a step in the woods normally with fear. What's going to hurt me? What's going to bite me? And by the end of the trip, they've discovered a few things a lot of times, because I try to, first, we dispel a lot of the mythologies and fears of snakes and gators and all that kind of stuff. The natural world doesn't, well, I think I usually say movies are not good teachers. They're not necessarily true. They're for entertainment. And so if you're stemming from, majority of folks stemming from what their knowledge of nature is from a movie normally. So Snakes on a Plane is just a movie. But if you walk outside in a respectful way and watchful as awareness and awakening all your senses, your 5 senses and more, and tuning into the way the natural world is moving, and follow that guidance, you'll find a lot of peace out there. You'll find that nature doesn't want to attack humans per se. It's really just going along, doing its job, doing what it's there to do. We have found that doing this over and over, people have found that their cortisol levels will drop and their stress levels will drop. And normally people, when they leave one of my walks, they say, yes, I would do this again. And yes, I will do this on my own. And I find that very fascinating. And I start to see people that return and come back, starting their own way of communicating with the natural world. And I think that's really important that we all do this. Science is now starting to prove that trees talk to each other and plants are conscious of us eating them. And, I think all this is a really fascinating thing, because these are the lessons that I heard from Native elders as I was growing up. And here's science coming in and proving it. As a young boy, I didn't need to be proven. I could feel that, but it's nice to be able to see the arts, science, and spirituality kind of coming together in a huge way. Trauma, and this land that I live on in St. Augustine was part of the first contact. The natives were here. hundreds of thousands of them. And as soon as the settlers or the conquistadors at that time landed, disease was spread and actually wiped out the majority of Florida. So the first was disease that contacted and kind of spread. It's hard to acknowledge the trauma, I believe, when I wasn't personally here. However, to be able to acknowledge the traumas that are passed down from generation to generation, I think it's important to talk about the hard stuff and look at it. It's important to learn the act of forgiveness. And during the Sundance with Basil, we were standing there at the tree. And I remember Basil, and I was talking to him this morning about this. I remember Basil saying, I can see the spirits come back down to physical form to help with this trauma healing. And I find that very fascinating because the Sundance is the opposite. The Sundance is, as a Sundancer, I can speak about this. I can't speak about other Sundancers' experience, but through my experience, we are suffering the body with no food and no water, and we are dancing in the hot sun all day with sweat lodges in the morning and every evening. And what happens is the body shuts down, so something else has to come up and support it. And that's the spiritual realm. And people should not be able to survive 4 days without food and water, but we do. So we transition the human flesh and go into this other realm. And I think that's a very powerful experience. And often we do this to support life. And we say, I dance so the people may live, not survive. We do it so that people may live. And that's consciousness. That's awakening in the heart. That's awakening on a way profound level, a vibrational level. So when we return home to our other communities, we're passing on that vibration. We're giving that out freely to the people. And I think that's really important. Something that came up for me today was our elders like Basil and other elders. They're not going to be here forever, of course. It's going to be a time where every one of you are going to have to take that scepter and walk and carry that and share what you've learned. And, you know, there's so much to do in this world. And I see a shift happening right now. I'm very excited about this time. Apparently I was born to be at this time, and all of you were born to be at this time. So you do have something to offer. I implore you to, if you haven't discovered that, to do the work within yourself and find what that is, because that your greatest wound, your greatest suffering is your greatest gift to the people. There's a gift within each one of those wounds when you can come to a place of recognizing it and being at peace with it and understanding it, then you shift that into being a gift and sharing that with others. And I think that's really important. I think I'm going to pause right here. It feels right. I can talk forever, but I'm trying to check myself today, so I'm not doing that. But I thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to be with all these amazing people. And I hope that you continue to do the work. I hope that you continue to be out there in your communities and finding those places, finding, you know, the background of your town and being able to come and listen and open those doors for others. So thank you. Aho mitakiasan.
Aho mitakiasan. While you were talking, Ayolane, Basil Braveheart called and wanted to thank everyone for doing this. And he said he appreciates us being here and disseminating this information. I would like to call on my sister, Barbara Swetina, to share some healing vibration of music that will bring us all together in a kind of a closure for our experience today.
Thank you, everybody. And I'm just feeling so moved because the words, the music, it just touched me so deeply. What Ayolane said, that, you know, at 15, he felt like his life was saved by those teachings. I know, coming from Europe, that we have so much to learn, but I haven't really been in touch that much with Indigenous people. But just hearing what we've heard about the trauma, about the suffering that different people have gone through, I just want to thank all Indigenous people for the simplicity of their message, of staying true to Great Spirit and helping us now who have not grown up in these traditions to learn step by step the wisdom and the humility of those ways. So I would like to offer just very briefly what we call the healing song, which was done by my friend Philida Anamaira, who is a Celtic shaman. The song was created on the deathbed of somebody who was dying, and she was just trying to tune in what are the words that can be said. And I think the words might come into the chat. So they were, I am with you that I might heal. You are with me that you might heal. We're together that we might heal. And we're healing that we might love. So as we're singing in this, let's just really tune in that all the passageways, all the pains, the traumas, the difficulties bring our hearts closer to opening and to actually live the love that we are meant to be. I am with you that I might heal. You